NLRP and the Ad Council.
College Radio Day. You are currently listening to WWSU Radio's 17-hour radiothon for College Radio Day. Enjoy 17 hours of
back-to-back radio shows,
special guest interviews,
sports talk,
good music, no automation. From now until 1 a.m. Eastern Time on WWSU. This is Resistance Radio.
You are listening to World College Radio Day.
State ascoltando la diretta della giornata mondiale delle radio universitarie.
Ihr hört gerade zu den Welttag der Uniradios.
Estás escuchando el Día Mundial de la Radio Universitaria.
Hello and welcome to Old Lady on the Radio on WWSU 106.9 FM. We are in hour 4 of our 17-hour radiothon on WWSU Radio as part of World College Radio Day, where all college radio stations across the world are uniting together. This year's theme is Resistance Radio, where we're talking about how college radio has survived the COVID pandemic. So today I am joined with Debbie Lamp, who is our staff advisor at WWSU Radio. Debbie, how are you doing this morning?
Great. It's a Friday, and it's also Green and Gold Day, and the Friday of Homecoming.
And the right day to give as well.
It is. You're right. And WWSU would be a good group to give to.
Yeah. If you want to make a donation to WWSU Radio, you could go to our website at right.edu/WWSU, and we have a make a donation link on our menu. So support college radio, keep us on the air, and we'll keep pushing out some really good content for you. So
I'm not sure this show will qualify for good content, but
so Debbie Lamp has been with us since 2012 as the staff advisor for WWSU Radio. And today, I kind of want to go on a journey with Debbie and kind of explore her experiences with college radio. So we're going to start way back.
In the last millennium, Earth was cooling. Dinosaurs just stopped roaming.
Yeah, not quite that far, but back before you got involved with WOBN. So what led you up to getting involved with WOBN?
Well, honestly, when I was growing up, I grew up in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and it was very close to New York City. And so we had all the New York City stations, and WNCI, nope, that was Columbus. I'm trying to remember. There were some stations that were just super huge, and everybody listened to them. Mm-hmm. But they were AM. But they played music, and it was a really, that was how you got music, because there wasn't Spotify and Netster and some of the other things that came previously, in the recent history. But so that's how you got your music. And people would even record with a tape player for music from the radio to be able to play it later. I mean,
yeah, I don't think you didn't have CD players back then, did you?
Absolutely not. We didn't even have Discman. Walkmans were like a big deal. I remember that happened right before I think I graduated from high school.
Oh, so. Yeah, those little portable cassette tape players. Yeah, you had the big machines, or big tape machines back then.
We had 8-track.
Yeah.
There were records and 8 tracks. So
we have, I believe we have an 8-track somewhere in the station here. We just don't have anything to play it with, unfortunately.
Yeah, they were carts. That's what we called them in college. They were carts, and that's what you made your PSAs on. It wasn't digital.
Yeah. So before you got officially involved with WOBN, how did you hear about it and got interested in it?
It wasn't anything that you had a choice. If you were a communications major at Otterbein College at the time, that you had to be on the radio. So, and you wrote usually for the newspaper, or you helped the yearbook. And so I figured, what the heck, I'll give it a whirl to be on the radio, because I really wanted to be a newscaster. People know probably Jessica Savage, but you could Google her. But she was like the Jane Pauley at that time of female newscasters. And so that's what I really wanted to do. And traditionally, you went from radio to TV.
Mhm.
So that's one of the reasons that I got interested in the radio.
I think even today, it's still somewhat like that, where a lot of television newscasters start out in radio. Um, so you got involved with college to become a newscaster, and then had to take WOBN as part of your communications major. Um, what was your first day like? Were you intimidated? Did you feel anxious or anything like that?
Honestly, I can't remember my first day, but I'm sure I was intimidated and everything. There were some great fellow students involved that have gone on to do some pretty neat things in life. And it's fun to see them on Facebook and stuff like that too, and just hear their voices. One of my friends, Bob Kennedy, is the voice of the Ohio State football team when he's one of the announcers for them. So
Very cool.
yeah, and we did a lot of shadowing. We had to do a lot of learning. It was a class.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, because there were records and 45s, there were LPs and 45s, and you had to make carts and the PSAs. And I mean, the studio really didn't look much different than this. It was in the basement of Cowan Hall, which was the theater upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And my shift was Saturday after football games. And at that time, lots of people went home on weekends because there weren't a lot of out of state people.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like a loser time slot, and all the football games were broadcast, whether it was at home or away. They always broadcast those. So it's a little bit like how we do with our basketball games.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to bring pictures and put them up on the glass. We didn't face into a hallway. We faced into a lounge area. So it was kind of switched around from where we are here. And so I didn't have anybody to talk to. Nobody
Ooh.
was around really. So, and people didn't call in. I mean, occasionally my roommates would. And, but so I brought pictures to talk to, and you would just kind of plan your day, your hours. And then I think I told you a little bit about the teletype machine that we had that would spit out news. And so like breaking news and things like that would come. And so sometimes you'd run into the other room to see if anything came through that you needed to report.
Like breaking news and things like that.
Right. Because there were no computers. We didn't have computers at the board or anything. It was just the board, the cart, and definitely two turntables. And you always had to queue up the records. You did half of a turn for 45s and a turn and a half for LPs, because if you didn't, when you turned the record on, it went woo into the music, and so
Yeah.
you didn't want to do that because that was like as bad as dead air. You
Ooh.
know, that meant you were not paying attention. So that's what it was like. It was Saturdays, usually at like 2 in the afternoon, kind of me there for a few hours, and I always ended my shift with playing Bruce Springsteen, Jersey Girl.
We
So-
should end this show by playing Bruce
You-
Springsteen, Jersey
You
Girl,
can if you'd
in
like.
tribute.
Um,
I'll keep that in mind.
and I ultimately decided that education was the route for me, but I don't discount any of the experiences that I had at the radio station, because we had meetings like you all do. We had our meetings weekly, and we didn't have the Nielsen's as far as like the top rated shows that we had, because our shows were not on Nielsen or anything like that, but we did the Nielsen ratings of TV shows and things like that, because we knew that all media was together. There was
Yeah.
the importance of TV and radio and movies and everything. And John Buckles was my advisor, and he was new to campus, and this young buck from Indiana State University at the time. And we had Dr. Grissinger was like he was the chair of the communications department at the time, and he kind of was a legend in radio and things. There were certain things that happened at Otterbein that he was um, in instrumental in when they became a Senate. That was kind of news breaking. People were talking about that all across the country because students and faculty and staff were all equal. Their governance system, the way they had it at the time. And so, and Grissinger, Dr. Griss had one of the most fabulous radio voices ever. And that was just his everyday voice. I mean,
Was it like was it smooth and low
oh,
and
it was
everything like that?
awesome. It was really awesome. And he always rode a little scooter, like a Vespa, and he was bald, and he had been a Marine. And so he was this bigger, bulky guy with this really great, voice. And he always talked about little nuggets, the way he like moved his hands when we had him for other classes, because he taught speech and things like that too. So yeah, it was a great, and the people that were, there was a lot of camaraderie and things just like here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fun to follow people's careers. That, one woman was Missy Marsh. She was the news person, but she's Melissa Marsh now, and she's a meteorologist on some bigger station,
Yeah.
TV station. So, people have done really well.
Yeah, even nowadays, college radio, here at WWSU, I couldn't count how many people have gone through WWSU and ended up at Cox Media or ESPN or other stations, bigger stations. So, college radio really helps people get their foot in the door in terms of mass communication.
Radio is important, period.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. There are like little snippets of my life. When I look back, I can see like on a Saturday morning, my mom having the radio on, and my sister and I home, or, kind of coming and going, getting on bikes and stuff like that. But my mom would be like, she wasn't blasting the radio, but the radio would be on, and she'd be doing like, some housekeeping kind of things or hobbies or something, and the radio is always on. And the same thing, I have some really good memories of my aunt kind of dancing in her kitchen to some songs, and I always was kind of surprised because she listened to like the now kind of music at
Hmm.
that point. And so that was always surprising to me, how she stayed like kind of hip with the the updated music, because I would listen to it as well. So yeah, and I'm like a NPR nerd on my radio in the car, and I do listen to the radio through my computer now, and it's just an important part of life. There's a nice connection there with people, and I sometimes like it that you don't have to see people all the time.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's radio has in terms of benefits over TV. It's a little less intimidating by the fact that, I mean, unless if we're doing what we're doing right now and streaming video to YouTube, you don't have to worry about people seeing you. It's just they hear you. So, and it's funny because Shay always talks about when one of his professors told him that he has the face of radio. There's a lot of intimidation with television because you got to look nice. You got to have makeup on. You got to have your hair styled a certain way. In fact, arguably, and they taught this in mass media, I forget which presidential debate it was that was the first one that was televised, but arguably, the fact that it was televised had a significant impact on people's opinions of, or the outcome of that debate.
Mhm. I think it was a Nixon one.
I think it was Nixon as well. That's what was coming to my
Nixon
mind.
and Kennedy, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, sure. People get nuts about presidential candidates, especially, but it's a product of our who we are, because they worry about how many scuffs are on people's shoes. You don't want to have like totally brand new out of the box shoes. You need to look like you've been a person like out on the on the pavement kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, they can, at least in radio, they can just only hear us traditionally when we're not streaming as well. But yeah, you pay more attention to what people are saying, I think.
So going back to your, we kind of digressed a little bit, but we're having a really good conversation. But I do want to get back to your experiences at WOBN, and I wanted to ask you, what were your most memorable moments at WOBN?
I think some of the most memorable were times when I was like, "Oh, nuts!" Like I didn't
Like
push
something,
something, or
yeah.
there was dead air, or kind of scrambling around, or I can always pronounce Martina Navratilova because I had to. It was on something I ripped off from the teletype, and I had to keep saying it over and over and over to be able to not be tongue tied
Oh
saying her
wow.
name. So, Martina Navratilova. And it's a little bit like poetry when you read the news. You need
Hmm.
to have kind of a cadence to your voice. You don't want to, sound very flat. And so that was my big concern because the way that her last name was too many syllables for what I was trying to do. So that's really memorable. Learning how much time like a minute is. It's because, you have 30-second commercials and 1 minute commercials. And the one thing that Buckles, as I called him, always was kind of surprised at me about is I had no concept of time.
Mm.
And also, I sounded more nasal, and that was a concern. Saying like Sigma Alpha Tau, kind of. And so the Midwestern um, accent, if you will, is more appreciated on radio and, nationwide, which is kind of funny because we discriminate against people sometimes because of their accent. So
Yeah.
yeah, those were some times, and just laughing in some of the meetings. Again, we were downstairs. It wasn't like a dank basement with a dirt floor or anything like that. I mean, there were classrooms down there, so it was a lot like being in the tunnels here.
Hmm.
But people people liked those meetings. People, and I don't know, for some reason I always remember like coming out of the basement and it was like a sunny day, or like we emerged from the cocoon or something. So
Yes, the cocoon of radio. It's kind of the same way here, except we're not necessarily underground, uh, yeah, as in your case, but we are on the quote unquote basement level of the student union.
and we could really kind of jam out a lot in there, play the music loud, and then they could turn it up in the other spaces that were around the
Yeah.
the lounge and things like that, because Cowan Hall was where the theater was, and while there were some theater classes in there when they would practice being on stage and things, like it was just pretty much us. So we could be as loud as we wanted to, or, the costume shop was down there, and sometimes they would make requests and things like that, or you'd see some rolling rack of interesting costumes roll by because they were of their next production kind of thing. So there wasn't even an elevator. So I don't know how they got some of that stuff upstairs because there was also the prop place down there too. But yeah, it was a fun time, and I think we're always a little bit romantic about the past and the
Mm.
the things that we remember, but it's all pretty much positive. Just a few times scrambling around trying to oh no, I'm having dead air. That's the kiss of death.
And see, back then you didn't have computers or anything to automatically kick in a backup or anything like that. You had
No,
to find a tape or something like that to put on the air.
absolutely, or just start talking.
Yeah, that's what I tell the DJs here at WWSU. Like if all of the computers go out, just start talking,
Hmm.
because that's the best way you can keep from dead air happening.
Exactly. And some people had one thing that I remember is they would have like a radio voice or a radio personality kind of thing. And um, it helped, I think, when you made like the PSAs, or kind of, we didn't really have commercials, but, and we were an FM station. And I was always very proud of that because that was like a bigger deal. I don't know if you could ever hear it outside of Cowan Hall's basement, but you must have been able to because my roommates could hear it over in Clements Hall. But anyway, but people had like radio voices, like kind of reminds me of this person that used to advertise in New York City on commercials, like Crazy Eddie, like you're listening to WOBN, and like really kind of forcing things. And that was
Yeah.
kind of weird. But one of my supervisors, the dean of students at Capital University, was always surprised, like, do the radio voice, do the radio voice. I'm like, what a nerd. No.
I had to practice the radio voice too, and I usually don't do it either. I just do it for the recordings, like if you notice during the college radio day sweeper, for instance.
Exactly.
But if I were to do that constantly, like doing an entire 2-hour show with that voice, that would be straining.
It would be annoying as well.
It would be annoying. Yeah, true. Especially like if you're doing the news or something and something grave is in the news, like 2 people were found dead last night in Dayton, Ohio. Like you don't want to sound like that when you're doing
No.
a news story like that.
Yeah.
That's funny. So, did you have any like special events or anything that happened at WOBN on a regular basis?
We always did a 24-hour cast outside of the students' union,
Mm-hmm.
student center, I think we called it. And it was literally outside. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it was you would start on Friday and go until Saturday morning on homecoming, and that, you took shifts. It was like this, but we weren't inside. We were outside. And so, that was always fun. And I don't remember there was like some plunger award for people or something
Plunger award.
silly or something that happened during that newscast or that
For having the
broadcast.
most crappy broadcast?
I don't know. Stopping up the radio or something. So yeah, that was like, and you never wanted to get the plunger award, but it was the golden plunger, and like Dr. Griss would, award it, and you would just cringe if you thought it would be you. But it was always also
my
something
gosh.
fun to, you got the plunger award. So yeah, they would do that. Some group, I don't remember who it was, would always sell the chrysanthemums next to us, and people would just walk up and request songs, and maybe the coach walked by or something, and so it was a lot of fun. It was just a little 6-foot table and 2 chairs and some radio equipment. And there we were.
Now, since you didn't have computers back then, did you take crates of music up there when you did those shows?
Absolutely. All kinds of records. And sometimes you'd be like, nuts, we forgot, whatever at the
Oof.
station. Like people would run back to their room or something and get something.
Have you ever forgotten something important like the PSA or the commercial reel or something?
I don't remember. Well, we didn't have the reel-to-reel machine out there, but we always had to tape our shows like literally on the reel-to-reel, and I still have some of those. But thank God people can't hear those, because I would say stupid stuff like, "It's hug your honey weather outside right now. It's 35 on a Saturday afternoon," and so yeah.
Feels like 85 here in the studio right now.
It
'cause
is quite toasty in here right now. I think it might be the lights.
It could be the lights. I think also Wright State kind of is starting to turn off the air conditioner, but it's not quite cold enough yet to cool it down here in the studio, so that could be a part of it too. Plus, we got a whole bunch of equipment in here too.
It's cool in the evenings, and it's hard to kind of regulate stuff like that now.
Yeah. Let me see what else I can ask about WOBN. So,
I think our colors were red too. Like
Nice.
yours.
red seems to be a popular color, especially in marketing, and also radio as well.
Right. It was one of the cardinal and tan and cardinal are the school colors, but so red obviously, but it just always was. And
So, since we're coming up close to our first break here, what was it like when you got kind of close to the end of your, I guess, term at college and at WOBN? Was that a bittersweet moment? Like, what did you take, and also what did you take from WOBN?
I think I learned a lot about multitasking, about being able to kind of keep several balls up in the air at the same time, because you were you had a plan of what your show would be like, but
Mhm.
sometimes that didn't always work out because of news that would come in or something happened in the station. You didn't find the record. It wasn't put back properly. I mean, there were lots of different moving parts.
Mhm.
And so I think that was important. I think it was important to know that there was always somebody that could help you, and it was
Yeah.
okay to ask.
Yeah.
They may not have literally been in the studio with you at the time, but even if you had like a big oops or hiccup or something, then after the show you could say, "What could I have done differently, or what would you have done, or how do you fix that?" And somebody would be helpful.
Mhm.
Um, I also think I learned a little bit how to kind of talk off the fly because again, you needed to have sometimes you needed to talk between songs, records, and sometimes you didn't. And so you kind of needed to learn when to say when and when to speak and when not to speak and if it was just fluff or fodder or if it was helpful and meaningful.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is 11:28, so I think we're going to go ahead and take a break here. And when we come back, we're going to continue our interview with Debbie and kind of get into after WOBN, leading up to where she is right now at Wright State as the staff advisor for not only WWSU but also the Guardian Media Group and basically the media coordinator, I guess you would call yourself.
Right.
So we will be back on Old Lady on the Radio on WWSU 106.9 in just a couple of minutes.
Every day, men and women from communities across this nation serve as Reserve Citizen Airmen.
I am proud to defend our nation.
Proud to be part of a team that
And welcome back to Old Lady on the Radio on WWSU 106.9 FM with Debbie Lamp, the staff advisor of WWSU Radio. How are you doing so far during our show?
I'm doing great. It's fun being on here with you, Patrick.
It's fun having you. It's rare that we get to have you on the show because you're so busy running around campus all the time.
And this is the first time I've been asked.
Really?
Yeah.
We will have to change that for the future. So, we interviewed you about your experiences at WOBN. So now we're going to kind of progress beyond that and start off with what happened after college leading up to your opportunity here at Wright State.
I went to graduate school at Bowling Green State University, and I didn't have any involvements in radio or any kind of media at all at that time. So it wasn't until my first job at Capital University where I was also the yearbook advisor. So, and they did have a radio, but it was, gosh, it sounded like first of all, my first job was at Capital University, which is the rival of Otterbein.
Ooh.
I know. So, and their radio station pretty much stunk compared to ours. I'm not sure where it is now, but the WOBN of today is even more, it's really a neat station. It has its own kind of building, and it's really cool.
So kind of like WYSO before they went independent from Antioch.
Yes.
Nice.
And so their radio at Capitol was like they only broadcast live a few times a year, and it would only be in the student center, and it sounded like it was coming out of a tin can. So I was always like, well, unfortunately, I felt a little superior, and I felt bad for those students because they didn't have as many awesome experiences as I did. So, and then somehow I've always been able to be either the yearbook advisor or somehow at Fairleigh Dickinson University in Florham Park in Madison, New Jersey, they did have a radio station. And they had CDs, and at that time, when they weren't on the air, they had one of the CD players that could hold, like, I don't know, 100 CDs or something crazy.
My gosh, they had those back then?
Yeah. So they would play those, and they didn't do as much live, and they still considered themselves a radio, even though much of it was just remote, essentially.
To be fair, there are a lot of stations even today that don't do much live anymore. A lot of it is automation,
Right.
and I think that that's another thing that college radio brings that is a benefit, because a lot of modern stations still stick to voice tracking and pre-records and things like that more so than doing things live in real time like we're doing right now. Like those of you who are listening to us on the radio, you're hearing 10 seconds after it's actually happening in the station. It's pretty real time. So, and those of you online, it's about 30 seconds, I believe, somewhere around there, between 30 and 40 seconds, but still real time. And that's something that college radio, brings forth to the community, is this real time radio, I guess. What am I trying to say? Programming.
Right.
And the nice thing about real-time radio is the interactivity that can go along with it, because when you're on live, you can have people send you questions. You could have people send you statements through, the phone line or the chat or things like that.
Request songs.
You could have people request songs, yeah. So it's really nice to have that interactivity as well with live shows.
The other thing that happened between WOBN and now is there were lots of TV shows that had something to do around radio. WKRP was on, Frasier. So, but those were more talk kind of things usually. But it kind of highlighted radio, and because radio was one of the medias that we didn't have Facebook and all those things to live stream music and things like that. So that was how people connected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. Before actual radio, people didn't have much, and so when it took over for it was a precursor for the TV, and families used to sit around the radios at night and hear stories and
Get the
plays
news of
and
the
things
day.
like that. It was,
Plays.
the event of the day, like you said. Yeah, that was what this like a social thing, and I can't imagine the family just sitting around listening to those big radios. But that if you don't know any different, then I'm sure if a lot of those folks came back, if they're gone now and saw everything that radio is now, they would be flabbergasted.
Yeah. Yeah, because radio today has a lot of modern equipment. Well, we don't have very modern equipment at this radio station. We're still kind of in the 80s and 90s era. Well, maybe not that far back, but 2000s.
I think so. I think you're
90s and 2000s in terms of equipment. We did get new computers, though, and I'm so excited about that because we've had those old computers for how long, and they've been running like a train, very slow train. So that is one of the unfortunate things, though. A lot of college radio stations struggle budget-wise because they don't, corporate radio, they focus a lot on advertising and bringing in money from advertisers. The caveat to that is they have to rely on hitting high-quality, high-rating shows, so they can't be as flexible with content on the air as college radio can. But the plus side is they have more funding, unfortunately, than a lot of college radio stations are able to get.
Well, college radio, though, really is married to the music industry because lots of music folks come up through the college radio.
That's how a lot of artists start their careers is through sending their music through college radio.
Exactly, or performing in a radio station, or that the band or whatever that you saw at the bar last weekend or something. That's how music happens and becomes popular.
Yeah, like WYSO has a couple of big rooms for bands to perform in. We unfortunately don't have something like WYSO, but we do have the lobby, so we can have bands come in and perform in the lobby. And college radio is definitely music oriented,
and it's just different music. It's not the quote mainstream things that people pay to have on the radio.
Yeah,
or that radio stations have to play because they're a subsidiary of that. The station and the music company are together.
Yeah. You're not gonna you'll hear some different genres that you probably never heard of on radio before when you tune into college radio. Like, we had a vaporwave genre at one point, which I think we should probably get back. Just some experimental stuff. We have, electronic music sometimes on the station. You don't hear that on other radio stations.
Just even some of the up and coming music that may be considered a little different, or the indie music, that kind of thing is that you don't normally hear on, I don't know how else to say it, but like regular syndicated radio.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get involved? What led you up to Wright State University? How did you get involved with Wright State University?
I have worked at several different campuses. I have worked at Capital University right after graduate school at Bowling Green. I worked at, I'm trying to remember my resume right now. That's why I'm the old lady. So I went from Capital to Coastal Carolina University in Myrtle Beach, Conway, South Carolina. Then I went to Fairleigh Dickinson University, and then I went to Ohio Wesleyan University. I'm here now. So mostly I was at private, smaller schools.
Mm-hmm.
Coastal was a state school, but Fairleigh Dickinson was not. And but along the way, working in student activities, I traditionally had something to do with one of the medias. And yearbooks were considered a media. We don't have a yearbook right now, but
Mm-hmm.
because we have Facebook and all these other things, people don't need that.
I mean, I would argue that yearbooks are sentimental though, because it's a physical piece of your college history or high school history. But
I am right there with you. I absolutely agree.
maybe I'm old too.
Uh-oh, because I still like to hold a newspaper, and we've had some issues with the Dayton Daily News delivery, and so
I enjoyed that too. When I did my show a few years ago, I would grab physical newspapers, and that's how I did my show. And this was just a few years ago. Like, that sort of thing is something you would think about, 10 plus years ago on the air. But I enjoyed physically going through those newspapers and reading from them as opposed to going online, especially because you have to deal with advertisements and pop-ups and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, there's something about like the tactile part of an experience in reading and reading a book. But now so many people have Kindles and just read things on their phone. And I mean, people are even watching movies on your phone. Like, this little teeny screen doesn't give you the same effects as the whole huge theater.
Going to the theater, yeah.
And the smell of the popcorn and all
$7
everything
popcorn.
about it. Yeah.
To be fair, though, you can't get popcorn like you can get at the movie theater. Nobody makes it like movie theaters make it.
It's something magic. You're right.
Not even movie theater popcorn from the grocery store is like movie theater popcorn.
Exactly. Not even, I mean, as good as UAB's popcorn is when they use their popcorn popper, it's not the same.
Yeah. So, how did you get the job offer from Wright State University, and what made you decide to accept it?
It was one of my friends at the time, Rick Daniels, Dr. Daniels, was the director of student activities at the time, and he had the position available, and I applied and was the successful candidate. And I started in a position that was a lot more like Courtney Lakaitis's when I started here, but I still had, he knew I had media experience in my background. So that was always something I think that he thought was beneficial, somebody that had that experience. And then it wasn't until my second year here that I think I interviewed for the position I'm in now. My first year, it was still 2012, I think, but then it actually came into the position, I think, in 2013. So, yeah. And there was different media here at the time, too, because there was Nexus, the literary magazine, was part of the trio of The Guardian, WWSU, and that.
Yeah, I heard about them. Did they not get funding to be able to continue, or what happened?
I think it just kind of petered out. There wasn't interest. It was a literary magazine, so there was poetry and things like that. And one year after the magazine kind of stopped, they would publish every once in a while in the Guardian, and so it wasn't the same. Again, I think it goes back to people moving on from holding books and being more tech oriented, and so people can read poetry and things like that, I guess, on your phone just as easily.
I wonder why, I wonder why Lexus didn't go the route of the Guardian Media Group, because the Guardian, they didn't shut down. They just moved their operations online.
Was, if it's not, to me, student organizations are successful when they come organically, not when it's forced from an advisor or a department. It's always... the radio station's a good example. If you all weren't so dedicated to this, it wouldn't be popular. It wouldn't be something that was fun. Yeah.
We have some people walking by the studio window, waving in, looking in, wondering what's going on in the studio. See, and this is what I like about where we are right now in the studio, or in terms of proximity to Wright State University. We got this big window where people can just look in and see people doing their show.
That's right.
Which is really cool. We have Shay Neal joining us in the station now. Shay, do you want to hop on a microphone? Hopefully, mic 2 works today. So.
It was
It
working.
does work.
I was going to say, it's been working the last couple times we've used it. We're on a hot streak. So No,
mic 2's been very spotty.
it's been a blast so far today. We're not even, 4 hours in, and I just got out of an awesome interview with the IFC president, Connor Algren, who's also on the homecoming court. I did an interview earlier this morning with SGA president Jonathan Sierro. I have former editor-in-chief Sarah Cavender coming on a little later, Justin Kinner, Kev Nash. It's a fun day of content today.
Those are all awesome people, too. I have worked with all of them.
Ton of great people.
So we are currently at the point in Debbie's life story, so to speak, where she had just come into Wright State University as the staff advisor, and we had talked about the point in time where we used to, WWSU and the Guardian Media Group used to be joined with Lexus, which was a literary
Nexus,
magazine.
I think.
Lexus Nexus? Nexus.
Nexus.
Just Nexus?
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies. I'm thinking of Lexus Nexus for some reason.
Yeah. No, it was just Nexus.
So how was your first couple of years in your position? What was that like?
There were really strong GMs at that time, and they had just come off of winning some awards in Dayton.
Was this the time period when we were named like best station in Dayton or whatever?
Yes.
So like 2009, 2010.
Yeah. So they were still kind of coming off of that, and I think the station sometimes rested on its laurels. So
yeah,
there have been some rebuilding years, and I think this year it's really kind of exploding and taking off.
This is not only rebuilding but exploding year.
Yeah.
I don't like using the term rebuilding, like no matter what in life. I think rebuilding like is a negative connotated word. I think it implies that you're in a bad place. So
taking the re off of it. Call it building.
I like to call it building's a good word, but I like to call it more reloading than rebuilding. I think it's more it's more like we have the pieces. I think we have the pieces in place to succeed here, and we have been succeeding, and I think that a day like today really shows off what we're capable of, because for the first time that I can remember, almost every, if not every, large majority of the shows and interviews we're doing today are all going to be up on YouTube later this week, and that's really, really cool.
Definitely.
I am still baffled by the fact that people don't like to listen to live radio. And on an actual radio or their boom box or whatever. It's not, or I guess they could be listening on their phones now or their computer, but it's just kind of interesting to me that doesn't happen as much.
I think part of it is because of the pacing of life. Pacing gets faster and faster as time goes on because we are working more and more. We have more and more things to do. And so people often don't really have time to listen to live radio except for maybe more than a few minutes. That's kind of why, things like TikTok and Venmo, these very short video websites have been exploding because people have time to watch a 60-second video or something like that.
I guess I advocate for digging a little deeper.
I do too,
and
to be honest.
The self-care, if you will, to take a few minutes for yourself, to half an hour to listen to a show, and it could be a favorite DJ that plays your favorite kind of music, or some kind of some subject that you're interested in.
Yeah. So, what are some big accomplishments that you have made so far in your position?
Goodness.
One of those big questions.
Yeah, I like to attribute all of the things that I do to students because those are the folks that I serve. I think that some of the big things that have happened is in the last few years, transitioning the Guardian from a published paper to online has been a huge accomplishment. Again, all attributed to students because they're the ones that do the writing and the work, but encouraging them to do that. And we were really kind of trailblazers for that. And other schools come to us now and say, hey, how did you do that? Because publishing, unfortunately, is expensive.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask, would you say that the Guardian Media Group's cutting of the newspaper led them to be able to afford to do what they're doing now, like with the media incubator and the equipment that they've been getting for that?
Yeah, they've gotten a lot of grants. One bigger grant for that, for the Students First Fund, but I think it has also given them the opportunity to report quicker and be a lot more fast-paced, because let's face it, when it was a weekly paper, lots of times you were reading something that was old news.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate thing.
So they can publish things, breaking news, that kind of thing now, and it can be as it's happening.
Yeah, within minutes, absolutely.
Right. I think some of the concerts that we've been able to have been kind of a big thing for students. I think really if the idea is resilience or resistance, is just being able to be back in person and continue to stay open. People are being smart about wearing masks on our campus and getting vaccinated and staying home when you don't feel good. So, yeah, I think that's been a positive.
Speaking of talking about COVID, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and how you and how the radio station and other organizations at Wright State have gotten through the COVID pandemic. What would you say was the main, I guess, takeaway or life lesson for going through, especially the lockdown with the COVID pandemic?
Well, because student affairs, the profession that I'm in, is so person to person, I never in a million years would have thought that we could do student affairs virtually. And I think that it has taught us a lot that we can do, and the resilience of students and the campus, all of that, I think is it was amazing, and how we just kind of quickly shifted almost on no time to being all virtual and having virtual meetings. And I think everybody never wants to hear you're on mute. No, yeah, you're not on. Your mic's not on anymore.
Or show up with a cat face to a court hearing.
Or like your family members walking around behind you, or the cat jumping up on your own, table or something.
To be fair, those are enjoyable moments. I love when cats enter the picture of a Zoom call. It just brings smiles to everybody's faces.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's life, and that was those were some of the moments that made the whole situation, brought some levity. And students would say, like, well, how much longer is this going to last? And it's the same thing that I said to some of my colleagues when, like, the Gulf War broke out. Like, okay, so when are they going to tell us that this happens? And I remember Dean Beller saying, Debbie, there's never been such a calculated war before. And so, we are all saying we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. Even though I'm the old lady on the radio today, I wasn't here in 1918 when we had the last pandemic.
Yeah, the Spanish flu.
Yeah, we didn't, we don't know what that means. And so life throws all kinds of things at you. But I think that the pandemic and being remote showed us that there's more ways to connect with people. And I don't think that some of those ways are going away.
Indeed. I agree with you. I think the COVID pandemic has taught us a lot. And the theme of World College Radio Day this year is Resilience Radio. How have we been resilient through the COVID pandemic? The pandemic has not only taught college radio, but has taught many other industries how to be resilient when things like a virus or a pandemic happen, and what to do to keep pushing on. I remember, I think it was like a year before the COVID pandemic happened, I was working on a way to try and get a completely remote setup working here at the radio station where we didn't need a producer to be here at the board. And I'm so glad that we had that ability before the pandemic hit. Because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had the shows that we've had during the pandemic. Because a lot of people did remote shows during that time, thankfully, because we had the technology to.
Exactly. I think that that was a brilliant move on your part, Patrick, and that we were one of the radio stations that got to stay on the air because we already had that capability. Yeah.
And my spiritual center was one, even though it's small, it's still open. Thanks to the Reverend who has, she's very intelligent with managing finances. So we got a lot of smart people in the world to, help keep businesses open during the pandemic.
Well, and some things started to come back too. Drive-in movies.
Yeah.
People, that wasn't something that we did all the time as a kid, but I remember watching Benji that way and Herbie the Love Bug and, some fun times with the family as little kids. You go in your pajamas. But so families are doing that again. I mean, shoot, we're doing it here on campus every once in a while. So I think that sometimes the old ways of doing things they are still viable ways to do things currently.
Mm-hmm. All right, Debbie, do you have any last words before we wrap up Old Lady on the Radio?
Keep listening.
Yes, keep listening. Support college radio. And speaking of listening, we still have a lot more content to provide you for today. Coming up next, and I just received a phone call for the next guest for the next hour. Coming up next, we're going to have an interview with the Laughing Chipmunk and Harmony, which are two people that are regular guests on my show. Harmony hosts a show on Sundays as well. They are graduates of Kettering Fairmont High School, so we get to hear from them about high school radio, which I think is going to be pretty interesting. And they're going to play the top hits that they've played back in the 1980s on their show.
Yeah, and just a little plug as well. We have Dean Taylor coming on at 1 o'clock, and he also went to Fairmont. So
wow.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people that are familiar with the Fairmont High School radio station. So
WKET, yes.
Wow.
So that is coming up. We are about to enter. Oh my gosh, I have to do math here.
Hour 4.
Hour 5.
Hour 5, you're right.
Yeah.
I can't
hour
do math.
5 of our 17-hour radiothon. So everybody stick around. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get right into our next interview. Thank you, Debbie, for being on the show and talking with us today. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for asking me, Patrick.
Oh, no problem. All right. Stick around. We will be back in just a minute.
This is Yarly G, and you're now listening to WWSU 106.9 FM. Fairborn, Dayton, Dayton's right choice. Yeah.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.